Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on another weekly episode of our Northeast Florida Real Estate Show. If we haven't met yet, my name is Angela Olmos. I'm a full-time realtor in the Northeast Florida area, and I'm here with my co-host, Delaney Bravo with Fiber Mortgage. How you doing today, girl?
I am good. I am good. It's Friday. The weather is beautiful, and it's a great day. How are you
It
doing?
is. It is. It is good. Good. Summer's almost done. Crazy to think about. It's just flown by. The kids are going to be starting school here in a couple of weeks. Today's their last day of camp. It's like, where did it go? But it's been a wonderful summer. Can't complain.
Well, you know what people told my neighbor told me yesterday that they start school next Thursday in St. John's.
Oh, well, there you go. See, we start on the 14th here in Duval. So they must have started, or they're going to start earlier in St.
I,
John's.
I was like, oh my gosh, summer probably feels like it feels like a blink of the eye for me, but I can't imagine for kiddos. It's like, here we go again.
Yeah, yeah. But as your kids get older, you'll probably get to a point where you're like, yeah, school's starting again.
Exactly. Yeah, go back.
It's all good. It's all good. They all need that balance. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. Every week we meet and we chat about topics that are related to buying, selling, and investing in real estate. And today, one of the things that I wanted to chat about is something that comes up quite often, and is how do you know if you're ready to buy a home? Like, we all instinctively know that it's probably a good idea to buy a home, and you should buy a home, but how do you know if you're actually ready? So that's what my blog it's about this week. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that into the comments so you guys can read more about that. But basically, there's just three simple questions that you would want to ask yourself to really determine if you're ready to buy a home. I guess number one is if you have a stable job. And it's important to have a stable job, or I should say stable income, because you might be working for yourself, you might own a business, so it might not necessarily have to be a job, but you do have to have a stable income coming in. And most of it is just because most people take on a mortgage when they buy a home. So that's a financial obligation that you're committing to for at least 30 years. So you do want to make sure that you have that income stability. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in the home for 30 years. Most buyers don't, actually. Do you find that too, Delaney, that most people don't stay in their home for 30 years?
Yeah, I was reading a statistic and it said something like on average a buyer moves, I think it said every 7 years. Um,
Yes.
so absolutely. But when you're going to qualify and get that mortgage, if you are going to obtain a mortgage, there you need to have some sort of stable income, whether that's related to employment or retirement. So you want to make sure you have that coming in because you want to, these banks want to make sure that you're going to pay on that mortgage.
Yeah, and it would make sense. So that's the first thing you want to ask yourself is, do you have that stable, consistent income coming in? Whether that is from your job, from your business, from wherever those funds are coming from. But if you have that stability and if you have that consistency coming in, that's a pretty good sign you're ready to buy a home. Now, the second thing you probably want to ask yourself is, have you figured out what you can afford? And this is where we come in as a resource to you. Delaney is a specialist in the financing part of it. She can always do your pre-approvals and help you figure out what you can afford. Because it really is, it's one of those things that you might not know, and a lot of people don't. It's not like you can download this stuff, off somewhere. You really truly have to do an application and meet with a lender and figure out, like, okay, where your debt to income ratios are, and how much you would need for a down payment, how much you would need for closing costs. It does take a consultative approach, and that could take a little bit of time, not a whole lot of time. What would you say an average application could take, Delaney?
So my goal is within the same day. Usually I always have high standards for myself on things like that, but I usually try to do within 2.5 hours.
Oh,
So
wow. Great.
yeah, so it's something that is pretty easy to do. It's, you just put an application in, and I'll kind of run those numbers for you. And another thing is, you use these online banks or kind of these pre-approval tools online, and they are designed in many cases to tell you the maximum home you could buy. So like you're pre-approved up to $400,000 homes. But getting into the payments is where you really understand what you can afford, because just because you're pre-approved for a $400,000 home, that might not be in your comfort zone. So we really want to get into your comfort, and that's where we get into what you can afford.
Right. And I think that does take a talk, right? That does take a consultation. That does take more than just like keying in stuff on an application online, because there's so many things that you might not know to disclose or to ask that could really play a major role into the amount that you've been approved for or how much you would need to put down. I thought it was interesting here that, they talk about the 20% down payment in a home is great. However, many mortgages require less than 3 to 5% of the purchase price as down payment. So this notion of like you have to have 20% down to buy a home, it's not the case at all. And you would quickly find that out by having a chat with a lender. And there are loans and grants that could also help cover some of these closing costs, such as down payment assistance in our area and things of that nature. But it really does take, just taking a minute to figure out what you can afford. And then the third thing I would say is you want to ask yourself, how long do you plan to live in that home? And the reason why you would want to ask yourself that is another important thing is how long, because it's going to take time to build equity in your home. So if you plan to move soon, you may not recoup the investment that you paid just to simply on closing costs. For example, if you're looking to sell a home again in a year from now, it might not make sense to buy it right now if you're selling in just a year. Buying a home is a good idea if you're planning to stay put for at least 3 years. At least 3 years is kind of like the break-even point. Home values typically increase between 2 and 5% annually. So you could end up paying more in closing costs than what you earn in proceeds if you sell only a year or two after. So you definitely want to consider that. Okay, well, how long am I going to be living in this home? If this is something that you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to be moving out of the city or out of state a year from now, while I would love to tell everyone that it's a great time to move, probably not for someone that's going to be moving or out of state here in a year, unless you're planning to keep this as an investment, which might actually also be a good idea. And you will figure that out by talking to the lender. So, but definitely there's a break-even point, and you do want to realize that the longer you hold on to it, the more profitable the investment will be, because you really are, relying on it growing by the appreciation. And like they said, typical appreciation that you could expect in this market would be somewhere between 2 and 5. Now, we've had some great appreciation, but that was not the norm a few years back. So as we become more of a balanced market, you definitely want to ask yourself, well, how long am I going to live in that home? And the longer, obviously, the better. What do you think about that, Delaney?
Sorry for the ring. No, I completely agree. And I just did an Instagram reel on this. So if you're on social media, I do little videos about a ton of different topics. And Angela does a lot of content as well. So you can follow me at Jack's Mortgage Mama. But I just did a reel on this. So one thing, how you mentioned investment, is you buy your first home and maybe you are planning to move in a year or two. You then can rent out that home, not sell it. If you need to have a source for, funds for down payment on your next house, you can pool against that equity if it is there. If not, you could do 3% down on the new house, rent out the old house, and have a tenant pay your entire mortgage on that house while you're living in your next house. So it doesn't always make sense to sell if you want to recoup the maximum of that investment. So all of this stuff is so true. And I tell everybody, and same as you just said, yes, we can sit here and say it's amazing time to buy a home no matter what. But for some people, it might not make sense. But those are the things we help you navigate.
Yeah, and simply by just asking those key questions, it would help shed a whole lot of light into it. But I think the deeper dive of really just meeting with Delaney and then filling out your application and figuring out how much is closing costs and what could there be to maybe offset that, I think that's the best way to go. It really is. So I am going to go ahead and link the blog on the comments below. If you guys have any questions about any of it, let me know. But that was what I wanted to share with you guys today.
Yes, I will go ahead and share my screen really quick. Let's do here. Okay, so what we're going to chat about today is self-employed income. Does not sound like a really fun topic, but this is super duper important because because so many people are self-employed, and the way we have to look at things from the mortgage side isn't always, it doesn't always follow common sense, right? So something we want to get into. Do you have self-employed buyers? Like, have you had people who, you know, are a little bit confused on how the mortgage process works if they're self-employed?
Yeah, and that's usually the ones that have the most questions because, with self-employed, they get to, write off some of the expenses for their self-employed business. And I know that that has somewhat of an influence on the approval too, right?
Absolutely, yes. So that's exactly what we're going to dig into. So, self employed, I'm not going to go over every detail here, but there are a couple ways that you can be self employed. I know, for example, we can use a real estate agent as an example. You are employed by the brokerage that you work for, let's say Momentum Realty. And then, based off of the funds that you make, they are going to issue you a 1099. That is their way of saying, this is what you made. That money is not taxed. That money is not the same as a paycheck with like withholdings. You take that gross amount and you put it on your tax return at the end of every year tax season, and you say, gross amount, I made 200,000, for example. And then there's that section Angela just talked about with write-offs. Those write-offs, mileage, depreciation, meals and entertainment, things that you can write off for the expenses to run your business. I know you are self-employed, and there is a difference between that gross amount that you make, and it takes money to run a business. So you have the opportunity to write those certain things off. Like, I'm sure, girl, you write off so much mileage, I'm sure, about driving everywhere as a realtor.
I do. I put about 20,000 miles in my car every year. So I do drive a lot. And even when I think about, the driving expense, yeah, but there's also other expenses with, marketing expenses, signs, our board dues, just the cost of like keeping up all the systems that we pay for my real estate business. Yeah, so all of those are things that we have to incur to be able to make the profit. So with that, as self-employed, we get to write some of those expenses.
Absolutely. And here's how it affects the mortgage side. So your top of your gross income is 200,000, but you're writing off all of these things, and the bottom line is 75,000. The thing is that 75,000 is what you are ultimately taxed on. That is your taxable income. There are certain things like the mileage, the depreciation, that we can add back in to raise that income up a little bit, but that is what we have to use. So I have a conversation with a self-employed buyer, and I say, how much money do you make? And, they say 200,000. I will not issue a pre-approval until I have tax returns in my inbox that I can look at, because it's beneficial for a business owner to write off as much as they can, because that lowers their taxable income, therefore lowering how much they have to pay in taxes. But we have to go off that bottom line. So having a conversation and being self-employed, if you do make 200,000 and that's what you're bringing in every year, I need to look at what you're claiming. And that's where we can run into some issues if you write off so much that bottom line income is too low to qualify for the price point that you want. So it is a balance, and that's where you'll work with your CPA. So it's definitely a balance on what you write off. And that is something that those pre-approval calculators or those online lenders don't look at. You can put in the 200,000, right? And then you'll just get spit out a pre-approval from an online lender, but it's not accurate. So something to think about. What are your thoughts?
I think that is so dangerous to just download a pre-approval offline by just simply keying in what you think your total income is without having to in their account the stuff that you've written off. because you could very well be given a pre-approval for something that you really don't qualify for. And then wind up spending time, effort, and resources trying to buy a home that you really don't qualify for, which is one of the reasons why we have to do this up front. So that way we better utilize your resources, our resources, to help you get to something that you can actually attain. Because if you have, $200,000 income, but you wrote off $150,000 worth of expenses, you no longer have $200,000 of income. You have $50,000 of income, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, if you think about it, that's how that if you were working a W-2 job, you are taxed. That is your taxable income up front, but you just have to do that on your own as a self-employed. So we are looking at taxable income, not just face value, what you made before you claim it. So last thing I wanted to touch on really quick is averages. So you need to have 2 years of self-employed income on your tax returns. If you think about this from the underwriting perspective, we don't really have an average. If you haven't claimed it on your tax returns, we have no taxable income yet to go off of. You haven't claimed that income to tell us, hey, I am claiming $50,000. We can't just go off of that 1099 income and the gross amount because we don't know what you're going to write off. Secondly, having the 2-year average allows us to see, okay, this business has been in business, it is making money, and here is the trend. Here's the last thing to think about. If you, let's say we need 2 years, so 21 and 2022, let's say you started your business in 21 and you wrote off a ton of expenses because it was your starting year, and that's 50,000. But then 22, you're getting up and running and you make a lot more, and now your bottom line is 150,000. That is amazing. However, we have to do an average of both years. So if you had an intense increase, then that last year is going to affect the overall average. So something to think about there is that we have to do that average. So 150,000 divided by 12 is a lot different than 200,000 divided by 24. So these are all things to think about. Side note, if you've been employed and have been a self-employed individual for 5 years or more, we can usually get away with 1 year. And lastly, I keep saying lastly.
Yes.
We
have a lot to say.
I know it's a big topic, but the last thing I'll leave us with is if you, let's say that's reversed and you went from 150,000 and then, COVID happened or something like that. And now you have 50,000. If you have more than a 20% decrease from 1 year to the next, in going from 21 to 22, that can also be a problem, because how do we know it's not going to drop another 20%? We need to get documentation to show why it went down. We need explanations. We need to show that this is a stable, going back to what Angela said, stable income. So, do you have any questions? I know it's a lot throwing at you guys.
No, but there's also the one thing that comes to mind for me when it was time for me to buy the house, and I had just switched from being with a builder. I was a side agent where that setup was a W-2 type of arrangement. And then I went on to being an independent realtor, and that was a 1099 type of arrangement. I remember as I transitioned through it and we were looking to buy our home, there was a requirement that I had to meet to be able to go on the loan, which was 2 years of being self-employed. And I didn't have that at that time. So we ended up doing the loan just on my husband's name. Thank goodness we were able to qualify with that. But that was the requirement. And because I had not had my 2 years at that time yet, then we just had to do it all under his name. But that is, I think, is something that most people don't realize. There is somewhat of a requirement to have had that 1099 status for a while, at least 2 years.
Yep, and last little tidbit really quick is just because you don't have 2 years doesn't mean don't reach out to me because there are loopholes and I specialize. I love loopholes, I love guidelines, I love finding ways to make it work. And if you have been W-2 for 5 years in the same industry and you flip to 1099, as long as we can show that you are on track to make more as 1099 than you were as a W 2, we can get away with 1 year. So,
Nice.
so all sorts of little tricks. So bottom line is reach out to your loan officer, work with a local loan officer who knows self-employed, and we'll take care of you and I'll guide you in the right direction. And then Angela will take over once we know what you are pre-approved for. Once we get to where you're comfortable with the numbers and what price point that is, then you go and look at homes. So hopefully this was helpful. And if you're self-employed and have any questions, don't hesitate. Reach out to me. I love sharing, how to get things done.
Absolutely. Yep. So it's super easy. I actually have the banner scrolling through the screen. So it's as easy as just giving her a call and saying, hey, I'm interested in buying a home. What do I need to do? And then she'll take it from there. But it's truly the very first step. And then once you've been pre-qualified and you have your pre-approval letter, then I can come in and go ahead and do a buyer's consultation with you to find out truly what's important to you about your home, what you've been approved for, where we're going to be looking at, and then help you get through that process. It can all be done.
Absolutely. And then just to wrap us up really quick, I have 3 events for this weekend. 2 of them, I mean, it sounds like I'm obsessed with reptiles, but I promise I'm not. It'll
What
make
kind of lizards are you bringing in?
I know, right? The first one, it's one that has been around.
Dinosaurs. Nice.
Dinosaurs. It's been around for a while, but I wanted to just kind of bring it back up. May 12th through September 10th. There's a dinosaur expedition at MOSH, which is the Museum of Science and History here in Jacksonville. It's a really cool spot, especially if you have kiddos. They have all sorts of interactive activities. So definitely they have an exhibit right now all about dinosaurs. So if you have a little kiddo who thinks that would be cool, definitely go check it out.
So fun. I love Mosh.
Oh, I know. Didn't your kids do camp there? Or they used to?
Yeah, we did for several years. And then I found one that's really cool and closer to home. So
Yes. Yes, I definitely a little bit for everyday driving back and forth.
right.
The next is Pentatonics. So this is a really cool band. They're 1,000%, 100% a cappella. And they do like big hits and all sorts of things. They have their own albums now. So that is August 9th from 8 to 11 p.m. And they have a special guest. I don't know who that is. So definitely would be just kind of a cool, different event. And it is at Daly's Place right there downtown by the Jags Stadium. So definitely check it out if that's something that you think would be cool to go to.
Nice. That sounds like fun.
It does. And just kind of, I think just the mechanics of it would be cool just to see live,
A cappella, that's pretty high skill too.
Yeah, you really got to be able to hit those notes. And then lastly, like I said, it's like reptiles and dinosaurs. Repticon, which is a really cute name. Repticon. So if you're into reptiles and exotic animals, I mean, I don't know, but I just thought this was a cool one to throw out there. So it might be cool if you have kiddos and they'll just have a bunch of different stuff. There's vendors, and there's all sorts of fun kind of different animals. So even just to walk around and do something different. So there are tickets, so something to look out for, and it is at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds downtown as well. So fun little events this weekend.
Great stuff. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of what you can enjoy here in Jacksonville, just in case you are listening to us from somewhere out of state or out of city. If you're looking to relocate here, this is a great place to live. I've been here going on 20 years, and this has probably been one of the best things I've ever done, move here to Northeast Florida. I really like it. So we've got all the local knowledge, the expertise to help you through this process. So if you are interested in buying a home and you come across something that you thought, oh my God, this could possibly work this weekend, just remember to connect with us, as well as if you know anyone that might be interested in buying, we can help them out.
Yes.
All right, guys. So that's what we have for you guys today. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and reach out to us or put the questions on the comments. All right, guys. So until next time, just remember to be kind to one another. We'll be back again next Friday, and we'll see you on our next video. Take care.